So sustainability is often evaluated in three different pillars: social, economic, and environmental. I've been doing a lot of research on inequalities and inequities of sustainability and injustices of climate change. So this presentation on superfoods is really just one dimension. High-income countries, as we know, contribute a lot more to climate change, and the effects are felt by low-income countries, especially in the global South, Central America, the Caribbean, and Latin America. So I'm going to be talking about how this trend towards eco-friendly consumerism and impacts of misguided trends has become really mainstream by looking at superfoods as an example of where we really see this injustice. While ultimately that I think this is a good thing, that we are making these greener consumption decisions, it's important to note the consequences of our selective decision-making. So sustainable decision-making in the past couple of decades, we as consumers in rich northern countries like the US, Canada, the UK, Australia, have been trying to eat less meat, eat healthier, like you have the green juice phase. Superfoods really take the place of meat and just like really have enforced that healthy eating culture. And it's become trendy in doing so. So in examining a few superfoods and their social, economic, and environmental impacts, I point out the harmful externalities coming from the shift to sustainable culture. Additionally, misleading greenwashing from corporations is really confusing for consumers like us. And essentially in our hyper-consumer society, even what we perceive as sustainable has a dark side. So superfood culture. It's become mainstreamed to make more environmentally friendly decisions in like our realms of society. Movements on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook to be the greener and eat healthier is seen as one of the easiest and best ways of mitigating climate change, and it's become cool. So often the greener option is more expensive as well, making the environmentally friendly decision-making those a privilege. Kind of what we would classify as luxury goods, right? Like a Tesla. So what are superfoods? Typically, superfoods are foods with high nutritional benefits and low caloric intake. A superfood might be dense in antioxidants and fiber, vitamins, minerals, and healthy fats. Basically, they maximize nutrient intake and minimize caloric intake, making them better for us than meat and most processed foods while also keeping us full. And this shift towards healthy eating is positive, right? It's better for our health. It ends up being more affordable for all if we all eat healthier. And as mainstreaming any positive behavior is usually a good first step. Some of these examples of superfoods are blueberries, kale, salmon. However, superfoods have a bit of a dark side. So I'm going to be talking about quinoa, coffee, and avocados specifically, because before writing this paper and doing this research, that was the majority of my diet. So in the Andean region, I'm going to focus on quinoa. So quinoa is considered a pseudo grain known globally for its health benefits, especially in recent years. Quinoa has an unusually high protein content compared to other grains like wheat. So it's between 14 to 18% more protein than other typical grains like wheat and barley, classifying it as a superfood. So with this shift towards healthier eating and meat substitutes, quinoa has really become this miracle grain, known for its high nutritional value and like high protein content, high fiber content, really replacing meat in a lot of situations. This grain is traditionally grown in the Andean region, so Bolivia and Peru especially. In 2016, which the United Nations called the Year of Quinoa, 80% of quinoa globally came from Peru and Bolivia. Between 2005 and 2014, the price of quinoa rose by 500% in Peru, even as crop production more than tripled. And this high price of quinoa generally positively impacted the welfare of like these harvesting communities, which are the majority of whom were indigenous. However, it's like a double-edged sword, right? Because the international demand for quinoa was driving food insecurity, and there's making the crop unaffordable to communities who have been dependent on its nutritional value for thousands of years. So by making it more expensive in these areas, they can no longer eat it, right? They can no longer consume it. And because it was such a cash crop, like they just sold it in any opportunity they would have to eat it, and then switched to less nutrient dense grains like wheat and corn, especially. Environmental impacts are also negative. While quinoa is driving rich consumers like us to eat less meat, choosing a veggie burger over a regular burger, more a quinoa-based veggie burger, the international demand encouraged farmers to grow like less diverse crops. And this the more uniform crop, the worse for the soil. So for example, communities that once grew over 60 varieties of quinoa, really fertilizing and nourishing the soil and a really sustainable practice of farming, now grow less than 20 varieties of quinoa to meet that consumer demand. Another really interesting part is, in addition, in order to afford farming mechanisms and like more of the product itself, and like to put their money into growing more quinoa, farmers started selling off livestock. And in this region, like up in the Andes, llama manure, and llamas are native to that region. So they were selling off their llamas, and so not getting that llama manure to enrich the soil and grow more quinoa. And so the soil was less rich, and they ended up getting a little bit less of the crop, and a lower quality of the crop. So these factors really add to the negative environmental externalities of quinoa consumption. So avocados are obviously delicious. There's a joke and a trend that millennials are obviously obsessed with avocado toast, right? Millennials eating avocado toast. And I can't speak for all millennials, but like it's founded in some personal truth. This is like a definite example of a superfood that has been gaining tremendous popularity here in the States, and like especially in like a lot of other rich Western countries. Again, like think Western Europe and higher income countries. And in doing so, this mass consumption of avocados is harming social, environmental, and economic sustainability pillars in their place of origin, which is Mexico. So as demand for avocados has increased significantly in the past few years, the sudden demand has really shaken the supply system. In 2014, for example, sales quadrupled that they were in 2000. Over 75% of Mexico's annual export volume of avocados comes to the US. So that's a significant amount of avocados from Mexico coming to the US. A fun fact is that for the 2020 Super Bowl, the single day event Super Bowl was responsible for 7% of the annual consumption of avocados from Mexico. And a truck would leave full of avocados from the state of Michoacan every 6 minutes, full of avocados leading up to the Super Bowl. So really remarkable consumption of the US of avocados. Michoacan, Mexico is considered the avocado capital of the world. It has really rich volcanic soil and year-round sunshine, which makes it really ideal for avocado production. However, socially, this increase in revenue has led to organized crime control in this area. The Caballeros Templarios are a cartel that has been extorting farmers and sellers of fertilizer, really anyone on the avocado supply chain. And it has led to violence with farmers winding up murdered. Avocados have been started to be called the green gold or blood avocados, like similar to blood diamonds, just because of how violent the supply chain has become in an already violent region. This region has issues with cartel run and organized crime already. Environmentally speaking, it takes around 270 liters of water to grow only 3 avocados. Which puts pressure on local water reserves and especially low-income areas that have a high need of water. Daily, that looks like over 9.5 billion liters of water, which is equivalent to almost 4,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools every day for water in this region. So additionally, an estimated 1,700 acres of deforestation is attributed to the expansion of avocado production from 2000 to 2010. I wasn't able to find an updated statistic, but I would imagine that it is a lot more. And the loss of forests is making the area increasingly hot and dry. Exacerbating that, farmers have begun to plant young avocado trees beneath forest canopy and then allow for increased sunlight later on in the tree's lifetime by removing older forest and, like, again, contributing to deforestation. The carbon footprint analysis of 2 small avocados that you would get here at Aldi's is 3 times the emissions footprint of a large cappuccino with milk, and the carbon footprint is twice the size of about a kilo of bananas. So like really high carbon footprint for what you're getting. And the environmental impacts are already being felt with like increases in temperatures in the region, unusual rainstorms. A really tragic impact that really jumped out to me is the increase in deforestation has declined the rate of monarch butterfly migration to the region, which is like, that is the region for monarch butterfly migration. So it's not only like a really beautiful part of nature that's being lost, but a really important player in these ecosystems. So, and then economically, while individual farmers have made profits, those who haven't been exploited or have been exploited less by the cartels, it's in the farmers' economic incentive to continue avocado production. State-run programs like the Payment for Ecosystem Services, that's the PES you see on the screen. It's just, that's when it's like a subsidy for that the government gives to farmers so that they don't do like big monoculture crops, and that no longer outweighs the benefits from avocado cultivation. So farmers continued to destroy these ecosystems for this increased profit from avocado production because of the demand. And then additionally, trade agreements like NAFTA have led to the increase of the avocado industry in Mexico. So coffee is a contested superfood. It has a lot of, you're often seeing reports as to whether or not coffee is good for you. It turns out in moderation, coffee has a lot of antioxidants and I mean, I need it, everyone needs it, right? So Brazil is one of the world's biggest exporters of coffee. However, there's a rampant slave labor in the billion-dollar coffee industry. And even to brands that we see every day who are certified slavery-free still have this problem. And there's a state of Minas Gerais, I'm sorry, I'm not pronouncing that right, in Brazil, which is about the size of France. So it's a huge state, can be home to over, a single coffee plantation in this state can be home to over 250,000 coffee workers. In 2018, over 300 forced coffee workers were found unannounced in unannounced audits of coffee plantations, and a single 2019 raid found 59 undocumented and underpaid workers, and then most of whom were children. So you have these kids and undocumented people and underpaid workers without the safety equipment that is required for these plantations, because they use so many toxic pesticides. So it's really, really harmful for these people, and let alone they're not being paid. So the benefits of unpaid labor for the plantation owners actually end up outweighing the cost, because even when they are caught for exploiting workers, the fines are minimal and the audits are like very infrequent because mostly corruption, but also like a real lack of resources going into this. And then economically, coffee has a pretty high margin, but less than 2% of a Starbucks certified, ethically certified coffee retail price goes to wages. So only 2% goes to the wages of the actual coffee pickers. So, you know, you can spend $5 on a latte and only less than 2% of what they spent on those beans will end up going to the people who actually picked the beans and did like the majority of like the hard labor work for that. Environmentally, traditionally coffee is grown under shaded canopies of trees. So it's called, that's called shade grown coffee. And it really contributes to these like really delicate ecosystems, you know, providing habitats for animals and insects and preventing soil erosion, and really improving biodiversity of the land. However, because there's been an increase for demand in coffee, you know, you have these like trendy coffee shops popping up on every corner, or like the massive industry that is Starbucks, or, you know, similar chains like that. And the health benefits as well has led to this conventional farming methods that have been used for coffee cultivation. So sun-grown coffee is now the big thing, which it started in about the 70s. And it's been replacing the traditional shade-grown method by planting like mass amounts of plants in open fields, like basically coffee plantations, right? And they've been using pesticides and fertilizers to produce higher yields, but end up being more harmful to the people working in the fields. And then additionally, the exposure of the sun, that you no longer have the shade blocking the sun, affects the soil, so that the soil loses that nutrient-rich soil that you see in these shade-grown areas. And then again, that contributes to deforestation, right? Because you're getting rid of all the trees in order to create these mass coffee plantations. So as of 2011, over 2.5 million acres of forest in Central America had been cleared for coffee plantations. And then a recent report from the World Wildlife Fund found that 37 of 50 countries in the world with the highest deforestation rates were also the world's top coffee producers. So it's like really tragic, the amount of deforestation that coffee plantations are contributing just so we can get our oat milk cappuccinos from a coffee shop down the street, you know? So coffee is actually one of the products that is often certified by organizations that consumers like us trust, like the Rainforest Alliance. It's the little frog, if you see like a little circle with a frog on it. And even though it says like slavery free or ethically produced, it's not necessarily accurate based on many reasons. Like it could come from the producer really not being transparent to the supplier. So even though they're certified, you know, X, it's not necessarily true, which makes it more difficult for us in this widespread mainstreaming of ethical consumption to truly make these ethical decisions, right? And to truly consume ethically produced products. And again, these certifications lead to more expensive coffee for the consumer, for us. So when before it would have been a lot cheaper, or if you get, I don't know, Folgers or something that isn't certified, it's going to be a lot more affordable for us, the consumer, to buy because they're not certified, but the certifications don't necessarily mean anything. Which leads me to greenwashing. So similar to misleading coffee certifications, greenwashing is a marketing technique used to reach consumers looking to make more sustainable decisions. So like corporations use these marketing techniques to come off as more sustainable and greener rather than actually spending the money to be so. And this rise of more ethical decision-making among consumers, corporations are really seizing upon the movement and misleading green marketing for a profit. So for example, you could have shampoo that says all natural and have a green label on it, just like the physical green label, like it being the color green is really popular. Or you can have environmentally friendly on like a bottle of laundry detergent full of harmful chemicals that end up going into our groundwater, right? And we live in this really hyper consumer society where we're constantly absorbing material and images as to what is cool and what is trendy and what's sustainable. And we're really shifting towards this eco-friendly consumerism, but we're being misled by the corporations and who really manipulate our desire to live more sustainably. Like it's the keeping up with the Joneses effect, right? And not necessarily in Latin America. An example that I found in my research, which is really tragic and like heartbreaking, is that Fiji water, that like $4 bottle of water. They have a commercial. I linked it here and I can send it in the chat later on. It's narrated by this like sweet little voice of a child talking about how natural Fiji's water is and how eco-friendly and green this company is. When in reality, they're putting water in a single-use plastic bottle and being shipped hundreds of thousands of miles in planes and ships and all these like heavy carbon producing modes of transportation to be distributed to people to use one time and then like recycled, right? When the reality is that 47% of people native to Fiji don't have access to clean drinking water. So it's just like a real injustice for such an expensive luxury product. So basically greenwashing makes it even harder for us to make these sustainable and eco-friendly decisions, like truly sustainable decisions. So what does this mean? Like overall, I think that while these green commodities like superfoods and all natural shampoos have a dark side, this mainstream sustainability and this trendy, environmentally friendly options are moving in the right direction. This push that we have towards sustainability is well intended, right? We're willing to spend more money for something that is more sustainable, and it will produce positive outcomes in the long run. In other words, the keeping up with the Joneses mentality to sustainability might be a little superficial, but it's a strong first step to get to, you know, like actually making an impact in climate change. Consumer culture is flowing in the right direction. So I guess my question that I'm posing is this kind of virtual signaling enough, right? Food insecurity is going to be a huge problem as populations rise, especially in lower income countries, and we start seeing more effects of climate change Rich nations demanding sustainable items from poorer countries means less commodities for them, right? The quinoa effect, they have less quinoa accessibility when we're eating it all. And then we see this beyond food as well. How can we reduce our carbon footprints without hindering sustainable development and creating another climate disaster? As a general rule, the further away the commodity comes from, the higher the carbon footprint. So I argue that overall, it'll take a culture shift to sustainable decision-making rather than just making it trendy, to mitigate these externalities and these inequalities and injustices. And after doing this research, I can't eat avocado anymore and question every quinoa I eat. So I think it's just really about awareness and making these more responsible decisions. So here's some questions for thought. I thought we'd open up the floor for discussion here. Are there any questions?
I have a question. Thank you so much for your presentation. I definitely hadn't thought about all that went behind all these foods before, so it was really interesting. And I was wondering if you, while doing your research, came up with anything that either the governments of these countries or other organizations were doing to improve this. Like, what measures are they taking?
Actually, one of the local governments in Brazil has been one of the inspectors for the audits on coffee plantations, especially. Unfortunately, there has been a lot of corruption, and Brazil is known for having a lot of local government corruption. And because the plantation owners bring such revenue into these regions, there's not too much incentive, but a lot of human rights organizations have been getting involved, and a lot of certification organizations like Rainforest Alliance have tried increasing their standards and doing more audits and personalized audits. But again, that takes a lot of resources. So a lot of the countries involved a lot of the countries and regions don't have the resources to necessarily implement too much. I think it's more the responsibility of us, the consumer, to, be really reflective on what we're consuming.
Thank you.
Maybe I can spark decision. So beyond superfoods, what other kinds of sustainable products or greenwashing do you think you've encountered? It's an open question.
Oh, there's a question on the chat from Sarah, and it says, what were some of the other foods or products that came up in your research?
Something that, and it's not necessarily related to Latin America, but almonds came up a lot. The almonds are mostly grown in California, and the amount of water that they need is ridiculous. I don't have the numbers in front of me because I didn't focus on it, but and California is going through droughts, right? They always have a drought. They had all the wildfires, so it's really counterproductive. You're oh, well, I'm not contributing to the dairy industry because I'm drinking almond milk, but the amount of almonds that you need to create almond milk and the amount of water you need to create a single almond it's been perpetuating climate change and inequalities in the region. So another thing to keep in mind is where there are pressures on water systems, there are often lower income areas that are being affected by the water pressures even more than the general population might be. So it's really an inequality within an inequality, right? Thank you for your question, Sarah. And then I guess I could also offer the question, do you think it's a means to an end, this trendy sustainability, zero waste trend, which often don't end up being totally sustainable? Does that push us to where we need to be to actually make sustainable impact, I suppose? I hate using the word sustainability so much, but.
You can either use the chat feature or the raise hand feature to speak, just so everyone knows, just in case. And I think it's a good question. I think I think we should learn how to balance both sides, but it's hard.
Absolutely. Katrina.
Hi. Thanks for all this. It's super interesting, and you're doing a great job. I was wondering how you personally and how you suggest other people weigh the impacts of the dairy industry or meat industry in America, because obviously we know it's really destructive, but then we try to choose the right thing, but that's also destructive in other places. So how do you balance and weigh the horrible impacts of all food, really?
Thank you, Katrina, for that question. One thing that, like, the main policy recommendation that kept coming up in all of my research was to basically eat local. You know, there are a lot of, and if given the opportunity, and again, like, this presentation and this research is mostly targeted towards people who have, towards like people who have the resources to make more ethical decisions and spend the money to make more sustainable decisions. So while eating local and, you know, going to farmers markets and joining food co-ops aren't necessarily the most fiscally affordable or accessible even, it is like the responsibility that it was the policy recommendation is the responsibility of people who are already making these decisions to kind of do better rather than taking the easy way out and, you know, going to Whole Foods and getting avocados from Mexico. Instead, there are you can get California avocados or not eat avocados, Florida avocados, like just like eating more sustainably. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Suzanne, that's an interesting thing that you mentioned in the chat. It's a direct message, so maybe I don't think anyone else can see it, but like, is it better to use reusable water bottles or to have like you have or to use water to wash, or is it better to recycle plastic water bottles, which probably don't need water to recycle? I would imagine that the resources that go into actually recycling something might end up like adding up, and like the carbon footprint ends up growing. And then it's a matter of like waste, right? So if that water bottle is actually recycled, like it's still like contributing to waste, and often they aren't recycled, right? Because municipalities and local governments that control waste facilities and waste management don't often have the resources to truly recycle everything that's recycled or recyclable. So I would imagine that using your like regular, like a metal water bottle, for example, that has no plastic might even be the best. That would be my recommendation. But again, I am not studying the recycling part too much. Any other questions? What impact the policy recommendation of buying local might have to the countries producing these foods and products in Latin America? That was actually something I was really thinking about with, especially with quinoa, because it really made such a boom in their economy. Like you can see their GDP grow because of the quinoa boom. However, what ended up happening was that all of these farmers ended up putting all of these resources, and all these communities ended up putting these resources in quinoa production. But then other countries started producing quinoa, like, again, like not as sustainably farmed as they did in the Andean region, but like I know Germany and Italy started producing quinoa for the European market. So then what ended up happening is that they had the quinoa boom, and then they also had the quinoa fall or recession. I don't know what the actual term was that they had, but so all these resources that went into quinoa with these farmers who wouldn't have necessarily made that risk beforehand, they ended up losing profit. And it was interesting. It really restructured their community structures. because it was very community-based villages beforehand, where everything was really like it takes a village kind of mentality. And then with the quinoa boom, farmers who had more quinoa became richer, and then it ended up being like less community and more like individualistic in these towns and regions. So it was actually kind of sad, like it not only economically sad, but like culturally sad too, that the impact that the quinoa boom made. So I guess like the buying local is so, it's like a small group of people, right? The top of the pillar, the top of the economic and financially able to contribute to this like sustainable buying local. I would imagine that these regions and food and products, like the beans will still have to come from Brazil, right? Because like you can't grow coffee in Pittsburgh. You can't grow quinoa in Pittsburgh. So they're still coming from these places. I think it's a matter of like putting pressure on certification groups or yeah, just like making sure that it is like right now, if I go and buy avocados, I'll buy them from California, or I'll buy quinoa that says like sustainably certified in this region. And it like tells you the town too from, depends where you buy quinoa from, I guess, but like it'll tell you where where it comes from, and like just do research about where you buy it. There's apps like, I think it's called Smart Label, and they really tell you like all of the steps of the supply chain that made this product. And I think like just really making ourselves more aware about where these products are coming from, and what went into them will end up helping us make better decisions in the long run. Thank you for your question. Did I find any other products besides superfoods that are contributing a lot to this? An example, the Panoramas roundtable from last week with lithium mining in Bolivia especially, I guess, just because of the large indigenous population. It's, you know, we have these, it's like that double-edged sword of sustainability where you have electric vehicles are going to be, you know, produce less carbon, but what goes into them? You need the battery, and the minerals and the raw material for the batteries, you know, how are they sourced, right? And now you have this like mass influx of sourcing lithium for these electric vehicle batteries in Bolivia, and they're like ruining like these beautiful national parks and like ecosystems just so they can, with very little regulation because it's so new, really mine these materials. And you see that with a lot of other things, especially in smartphone devices. And just because of the massive rise of smartphones, you see that in Western Africa as well. There's been a big, I guess, rise of, you know, unethical labor and just really unsustainable practices in extraction for raw material. Thank you for your question. So I guess like my parting words would be, when you get an opportunity to do so, to really think about what you're purchasing is, right? Like here, we in the United States, in Pittsburgh, going to University of Pittsburgh, like really having a lot of resources at our disposal to really make more ethical decisions or to try to make more ethical decisions. Like it's impossible to live completely sustainably, but like, and to just like really think about, is that more sustainable, right? I always use this example, vegan leather most vegan leather is not actually more sustainable. And it's made of harmful plastics and chemicals. And a lot, if you get like a leather bag or jacket from like a certified vendor, a lot of the times that leather comes from, you know, like a slaughterhouse or something where they're using more of the animal, like kind of gross to think about, but you're using more of the animal than you would if it were, whether it would just go to waste versus like this fake vegan leather is just like full of toxics. So, and then that's not recyclable either. Whereas like most leather lasts a really long time and is recyclable or reusable, I guess.
Thank you so much, Caelan.
Thank you. Before I go, join us on Friday, Panoramas on Friday, for the Panoramas Roundtable on mental health and disability resources in Chile. And I will put the link in the chat to register this Friday. Thank you so much, Alex, and the center for hosting. This was fun.